Brown lets it fly. Bottom, a three.
From behind, knocking it away. Tatum cashes in.
Pritchard got it back inside. And
What's up, everyone, and welcome in to your Celtics source here on this Patriots win Sunday. Patriots improving to 5-2, 4 in a row, 3-0 on the road this season. And I wanted to just take the time to go over some of the biggest takeaways from the Celtics preseason and really preview what is going to be a season of no expectations. And with that actually comes expectations in that, we have guys that we're counting on to perform with Jayson Tatum being out. Jaylen Brown, Derrick White, Payton Pritchard, even, a guy like Anfernee Simons to a degree. And I'm actually super excited to see how the season unfolds. I think there are guys that have, this team pretty low in the standings. There are people that are pretty bullish on this team. And, I tend to agree with some of those guys that are, maybe not in the 50s, but I think this team can be a winning team. They can win 45, 46 games, get into that, maybe 6th spot in the playoffs. I know they could just as easily be that, bottom of the tiers lottery team. But I want to go over, I want to just run through a bunch of players and the positives. We're going to go over to the negatives as well, and then some of the overall themes just from the season, and then we will preview Celtics 76ers at the end of the show. But let's start with the positives. And I think there are really two guys that I think stood out specifically. And one of those is definitely Josh Minott. I thought Josh Minott just was super strong, super athletic. He was consistent, which I think is the biggest part of why he played so well and got opportunities in the preseason. Right? Joe Mazzulla is going to be counting on guys just to be able to knock down a shot when needed, just to make the plays, the winning plays, right? There's going to be ups and downs from every single player. There's going to be nights, I think, where Jaylen Brown has, 5 turnovers, and I know he's the one that cost them the game. There's going to be games where Derrick White can't make a shot. But guys that can just be as consistent as possible and play with 100% effort are going to be the guys that get the most amount of minutes, right? He could play well off of a Brown. He can, play well off of a Derrick White as well. And just, he is more of that, forward position, but he did a great job of knocking down shots from the corner, making his shots, which I think is the biggest part, how the rotation is going to be made, because you have an abundance of forwards and wing players that all are pretty much bring almost the same skill set to the table. And so it's going to be who can make the most shots, who can stay consistent, and that's who's going to be able to get playing time in a roster that basically is a couple guards, a couple centers, and almost all forward and wing players. Another positive, obviously Chris Boucher, which we'll do a full thing on him in a little bit, because I really think he could be your starting center ahead of Neemias Queta. But I thought Tillman played well, looking for a bounce-back game after, he really struggled last season, sort of got played off the court. I think that partly had to do with his, knee injury and other sicknesses and illnesses bothering him. So he's looking to, basically get back into the lineup. And I thought he did a good job of, at least securing a couple minutes in, the start of the season. I don't know if it's going to continue, but I thought he did a good job of knocking down a couple threes. it still doesn't look great, even though he worked all season, all off season on trying to make threes. So that continues to be a struggle, which makes it so hard for them to play him and for Joe Mazzulla to play him on offense. But Xavier Tillman did a good job of staying in front of guys, providing a strong defensive effort, and the Celtics might need that, right? It might be where Joe Mazzulla realizes, he doesn't have great offense, but the Celtics can't get a stop, and they need someone just to be able to get in there and rebound the ball and play big, and basically take away the other team's offensive capabilities so that the scoring can be more even. We talked about Keita the other day in the postgame show, right? He didn't have a great first couple of games, but he showed up in the final preseason game against Toronto's starters, which is a good thing because the other couple of games he hadn't showed up against the deep bench, even G League players. So it's great to see Keita. I still think Keita is going to start in Game 1 against the 76ers because I believe Joel Embiid is going to be playing, and you're just going to need someone that is, almost the same size as him, and a Boucher or a Tillman is just not there at that moment, or not at the same height or size as him. Luka Garza, right? He might be able to start on Tuesday or on Wednesday. I think he's a little skinny to go up against a Joel Embiid, but he did a good job of flashing different strengths, giving Joe Mazzulla matchup flexibility, which is huge. And then you always have Derrick White, Payton Pritchard, who are probably, along with Jaylen Brown, the most reliable two-way players. Aggressive shooting, right? Derrick White, 33 points, he took 17 threes, right? So that's a huge thing for him this year. Can he get up just the enough shots to keep a team in the game, right? He's going to have games where he's inefficient and it might hurt the team, but I think if he's taking less than, 20 shots a game, he's not helping the team because they just need his offense, right? Along with Pritchard and Brown, right? You just need the shot creation that nobody else on the team can bring. Maybe an Anfernee Simons, although Anfernee Simons might get played off the floor defensively because as much as he talked about, it being all about, want and energy and effort, he has looked pretty bad on the defensive end, to say the least. He is, and it's not necessarily the on the ball stuff, right? He's doing an okay job of, guarding his player and contesting the shot. It's more the off the ball. He's like falling asleep on backdoor cuts. Players are going one way and then, stopping and faking and going another way, and he's just getting absolutely lost out there, and it's becoming a problem. Or really, it is a problem that I don't think is going to be ready to go or fixed by Game 1. But moving on to some other positives, the pace and the energy that guys are bringing overall is pretty fast and encouraging, to say the least, right? Every team talks about, can you bring a pace for, a full game? Can you, sprint up and down the court? And for the most part, the Celtics have stayed true to that here in the preseason, right? I think they're going to try and play as fast as possible, as much as possible, and we'll see how that ends up. That might turn into some sloppy shots, especially from, some of your bench guys that are not as used to handling the ball. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want them to be forcing it up so quickly that they're just losing control of the ball and turning it over. But we'll have to see how it goes because I don't think they're going to be able to play that fast for, a full game. There's going to be moments in the game where they have to slow it down for, entire stretches of play, maybe a couple 3 minutes, 4 minutes, so players can catch their breath, especially Derrick White, Payton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, who are going to be playing so much that they're just going to need a moment or two to catch their breath. All right, let's move on to the negatives here. Turnovers, right? That continues to be a problem, especially from some of the guys that are not used to handling the ball. Um, Derrick White, Payton Pritchard have been pretty good for the most part. Anfernee Simons, as much of an offensive player as he hasn't looked great. He did have that game against the Raptors, the final game. He did turn over the ball, I think, like 4 or 5 times, which is not something you want to see from your either starting point guard or your, sixth man. So that's something that's going to have to work itself out, especially if he can't play defense and he's turning the ball over. I mean, he's not going to be playing much this season. I can tell you that because Joe Mazzulla, I know at some point is going to get fed up with him just giving no effort on the defensive end and then being streaky on that offensive end. Rebounding, it looked okay in the Raptors game. Raptors are obviously a pretty good offensive rebounding team. That's one of their strengths. But, that still needs some work, right? We still need to work on boxing out. Too often watching instead of crashing the boards and, grabbing rebounds. We need this from guards as well, not just centers and forwards. All right, Derrick White, Payton Pritchard have to get their hands on balls and get deflections as much as possible as well. We talked about Anfernee Simons and his struggles. Baylor Shireman, I'm not sure what's going on with Baylor Shireman because, I know it's just his second year, but he does not look great. He can't find his rhythm. He just looks mentally out of it, right? I think he might have lost his rotation spot to like a Hugo Gonzalez, who has looked great in his limited stint, just being that energy guy and hustle and rebounding. And Baylor Shireman, he can't find a way to, knock down his shot consistently. He looks almost freaked out when he has the ball in his hands and is rushing it and is getting turned over because of that. And that's a huge problem because I thought Baylor Shireman coming into this season could be that, fill in that spot for a Drew Holiday. Not maybe quite as good defensively, but could be a on-the-ball guy, could also be a sit in the corner and knock down shots. And it's not looking like that right now. Along with Jordan Walsh, who obviously is not a shooter like Baylor Shireman, and Jordan Walsh just has some athleticism that Shireman doesn't bring. But Jordan Walsh is a little injured right now. I think his hamstring, along with Brown, which we'll talk about in just a second, because Jaylen Brown, right, if he's not ready to go, that changes the whole, itinerary for this season. But Jordan Walsh, he's pretty underwhelming when he is available as well, right? It's looking like he's not going to be able to find a clear role coming into the season along with Shireman. And, if he's not playing early and Joe Mazzulla sort of forgets about him, it could be hard for him to crack that rotation as the season continues. Before we talk about Chris Boucher, which is, more of the same, just the energy, the effort, just being basically a pain in the ass for teams on the boards, right? Offensive and defensive when he can be, and then also occasionally knocking down the shot or two. Let's talk about Jaylen Brown real quickly. His calf or hamstring that he sort of tweaked in that final game against the Raptors. It still remains unclear, I guess, and the biggest concern heading into Game 1, because obviously if he's not playing, this team's going nowhere, right? They don't have a chance without Jaylen Brown, and even if he misses, a month or so, that could really set the team back so much that they are going to struggle to find ways to, climb back into the playoff race. But, it's not, we don't know yet whether he's going to miss Game 1 or not. So until we know for sure, there's not much more you can say about it than just, hoping for the best. And so we'll move on to Chris Boucher on, just what he can bring to the table. Obviously the effort, that's number one. The rebounding, that's number two. But just if Baylor Shireman's not knocking down shots and you're not getting, shooting and, consistent offense from your other centers, he could be the center in a small ball 5-man lineup where he is that starting five, or starting at the 5 position, and just trying to basically be a team that just is physical, is scrappy, is, basically trying to make deflections and force turnovers instead of waiting and trying to protect the rim and be a shot stopper. Because, right, when really this whole team doesn't have the rim protection besides Keita, and especially not the shots to go up and contest shots. So when Boucher is on the floor at that 5 position, the team is going to play a different type of defense. A defense where they are, trying to, instead of, waiting to try and contest a shot, they're trying to force a bad shot, a turnover, a deflection before it can even get into a shot. And so to try and limit the chances that another team has, especially when they don't have the rebounding or that ability to block a shot. But, we're going to wrap it up here. Just some overall themes from preseason, right? It's a strong foundation, I think, but some shaky details around the edges, right? The effort, the chemistry, it all looks great. The rebounding, the turnovers, those are some weaknesses. The bench, it's really a bunch of, you could say this team has a deep bench, but really, guys, I would say 6 through 12 are all really the exact same level. They're all the exact same type of player, true. So it's really just, your starting lineup and then basically a replacement for any one of those guys at any time, which doesn't give you that much depth when you think about it. I think the rotation could be pretty fluid because of that as well. There might be days where Joe Mazzulla starts some guys, and then, another day he starts a totally different lineup. Obviously, Brown, White, maybe Pritchard, although Pritchard has said he's going to come. He's fine coming off the bench, although I don't think that will happen. But Brown, White, Pritchard, and some sort of center will be on the court. But, that center position and the forward position could be a different guy every single game. So we'll just have to wait and see. But, yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow on social media. We will be live after Wednesday's game, opening night against the Philadelphia 76ers. And until next time, go Celtics.
Brown lets it fly. Bottom, a 3.
From behind, knocking it away. Tatum cashes in.
Pritchard got it back inside.